honestly, we're humans first. I don't have an X on my forehead because I'm Gen X. I have 2 kids, and if I sent them an email, they would never read it. They barely read my text messages. I'm not sure if I need to start sending up smoke signals.
What one generation sees as lazy, another sees as efficient.
Powered by NEI Global Relocation. This is Relocation Leader, the podcast where we help advanced professionals in the world of global mobility. Now, here's your host, Zach Turbis.
All right, welcome to another episode of Relocation Leader. I'm your host, Zach Turbis, and I'm really excited about the team that we have here with us today. We have Michelle Hill and Christy Baker. Why don't you give everyone kind of a brief rundown of kind of who you are, what you do, and what brought you in today?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having us. I appreciate it. So I'm Michelle with Revela. This is Christy. We both really, so we're not repeating ourselves. We are both facilitators and coaches that really work with various organizations, their leadership group, down to the front line of their organization, really focusing on helping companies build healthy cultures. So people want to stay. So people want to go there and be part of that team. And what do you want to add to that?
Oh, my. And we work with people one-on-one, individually as well. If there's something they're specifically struggling with, maybe a new habit they're trying to form, we help them with that as well. So, from the individual to the team, we kind of cover all gamuts.
I bet people are wondering what we're talking about today.
I guess they are.
So we are talking about generational differences and kind of how that shows up in not only business, but also relocation. And so first off, and this is, I think it's the biggest question, which is, what's actually true about generational differences in the workplace and what's maybe overstated?
Goodness. I think really what's overstated is the fact that there's so many differences between generations. I mean, honestly, we're humans first. We're not generations. We're not born with, I don't have an X on my forehead because I'm Gen X, right?
I'm glad you clarified that.
Maybe I do. Just for me. Yes, but we're humans first, and every human has very similar needs at work, and those needs are to feel valued, right? If I'm at work, I need to feel like my work is valued. I need to feel like I'm competent in my job. For lack of a better word, I'm earning my paycheck, and that I belong. I have a friend at work. I have people that I know at work. I have people that care about me at work. Those aren't generational necessarily. Those are human needs. So I think a lot of the differences are, they're just an easy button to not really dig into what's actually going on. It's just, they're a baby boomer, so they're not going to get me.
Yeah.
Well, if you dig a little and you actually get to know them on a little deeper level and a personal level, and you see them as a person and not as an age, then they might get you, and you might be able to actually meet each other in the middle.
Mm-hmm. And it's probably one of the biggest areas of conflict. I think is overused because, again, we use it as we lean on it and just don't address what really is going on. And we're not prioritizing seeing them as an individual and respecting them. And we just kind of plug them in this hole of they're a Gen Z, they're a Gen Y. And, one of the things that I'll challenge people with is, I'm curious, when you were going into your career, what did people say about you? Because, if I'm a Gen Z or I'm a baby boomer, wherever, we fall at that on the older, I guess the top two of age-wise, there's not a lot of differences because in the sense of a lot of our behaviors in general, maybe it wasn't me specifically, but you're going to see a lot of that crossover no matter what age you were, when you were that age. Take everyone back, but we forget. I think the other issue or other thing that comes into play is we are wired with a negativity bias. So
explain that a little bit more.
Well, we're wired to protect ourselves. So 24/7, our brain is just like, what could attack me?
Scanning for monsters.
Yeah, we are scanning for anything. And we're in those, technically we're not being chased by bears and tigers, but our ego can get bruised. And I can feel like someone is disrespectful if they disagree with me versus going, I hadn't thought about that way. What is it they know that I don't know? right? And get curious and lean in with some questions to understand why they believe what they believe. Now, that type of conversation can happen at the same age, same generation. It can happen across generations. But that negativity bias, because we're wired to protect ourselves, we see it's more of that instinct where we see more of the negative. You think about restaurant reviews, or you ask people, something about how is it to eat somewhere or whatever, their experience. Unless it was a blew it out of the park experience, a lot of times people, well, everything's great except, and then, 80% of the conversation goes to the except, that negative. And we really lean into that naturally. So we have to it's like working against what is natural for us to see the positives. And I think that it builds those barriers between the different ages, when in all reality, we're not really looking at getting to know them. And going back to what Christy talked about, we all have individual needs. And if I don't get to know you, I don't understand what your needs are. And if I assume, which again, our brain is wired to think quickly, to protect ourselves and make assumptions, because assumptions are a lot quicker than getting facts. We make assumptions and then we go look to justify those assumptions unconsciously. And we build this belief system about an individual that falls within this generation. So now everyone that's this generation is this one individual I know, or these few individuals I know. When again, everyone has different life experiences. Everyone was raised differently. People that influence each person is going to be different. And so every person is still unique to themselves. And yes, they may fit in that mold of a Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, whatever. From age-wise, it still doesn't define who they are. There's a lot more there. And within organizations, you can really hear it like intensely, where it's more of the blame of, well, that generation's just lazy. And then if I think that, I look for that. And then I start behaving in a way that deteriorates trust.
Yeah. One thing I'm always curious about, because, people laugh at all the generational jokes, right? Yeah. And typically you can't really get away with making something funny unless there's an element of truth in it. So I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about how you can take it too far, but what are some valid, ways that you can look at the different differences in generations and say, this is a valid difference, or like, this is something that you should consider when we're looking at a workforce that has people who have been around for a long time and people have not been around for a long time. So what are those things?
I think one of the things that I find is more those communication preferences. How do I prefer for my work, for my coworkers to communicate with me? Right. So it varies based on generation. So I have two kids who are Gen Z. So I have a 25 and a 22-year-old son. And if I sent them an email, they would never read it. Yeah. They barely read my text messages. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen, right? I'm not sure if I need to start sending up smoke signals. What's going? They don't want to answer my phone call. Maybe that's me. I don't know.
You gotta make an Instagram video and tag them in it or something.
They don't even follow Instagram. If I was on Discord, we'd be fine. So, they prefer with their friends. They prefer either Discord, so some kind of a streaming service. That's what they're on as they are talking to each other, or they prefer in person. And at work, they prefer in person. They aren't necessarily wanting to jump on the phone or text or send an email. I just want to talk to you in person. And you get all of the, communication nuances when you're in person. You get the body language, you get, the verbal tones, and you get the words, right? But the words are a very small percentage of what we're actually picking up from our interactions with people. So, and that's something they share with baby boomers. Baby boomers would prefer in-person communication as well. They can email, they will, pick up the phone and call, probably not going to text as often. Again, that's kind of a broad generalization, but they're just less likely to text. So, Gen X, I'm not a big in-person. Not a big in person, even though that's what I do, right? But if I'm communicating, yes. But if I'm communicating with someone, I prefer email, or I prefer probably more like a a Teams chat or something like that, because then I like to be able to think about what I'm going to say before I say it.
This is so funny that you're talking.
Especially at work.
Yes. And I'm a year older and same generation though. And so the catch of it is there's so much involved with who we are, and it gets into our personalities, right? Mm-hmm. So you can just break down introvert, extrovert is like one example, but that's still so big. I prefer getting things done quickly. And for me, typing things, sorry, typing this. I said I use my hands. Typing things, it takes too long. I'm going to pick up the phone, or I'm going to go talk to you. And I don't care if it's in person or on the phone, or I'll FaceTime you. I would rather do that than text. And then when I do text, so when I'm in person, you can totally support me on this. When I laugh at me, I talk a lot. But when you get a text from me, it might be K, like really short. A letter. I mean, well, there's sometimes I do get a book because I can't talk to you, but I want to give you all this information. But it's like one extreme to the other. And so obviously people pick on me about that. But
You're just a versatile generation.
Yes, we could say that. But yeah, it gets back to, again, the human differences that...
Well, it's interesting too, because I actually do think that there probably are some generalizations that would capture a lot of people in that group. But the problem is there's a lot of people that
don't fit that. Yes.
And then if you start assuming you could run into communication problems, you could, you could run into like, hey, I thought I was going to do this because, this is sort of in my ballgame. It's like, oh, I thought we just cared about getting it done no matter who does it, so when you start assuming some things, it really does put you into some hot water, So like there's a difference between recognizing what's generally true and maybe having a chuckle, and then taking that into the workplace where there's decisions that can be impacted and, things like that. Technology really has sort of fragmented things such that people can have such varied interests, and it is like, we're thinking of when we have to relocate employees now, right? And now we can have that FaceTime. We can Zoom with them. We can, we're thinking about AI agents and like all these different avenues of like, how do we communicate? What are their preferences going to be? Is it a generational thing? And so like now, you have to sort of, maybe where in the past, it's like, hey, this is what we've done because this is what we've been able to do. And there's not been so many options. Now, because of technology, there are so many different avenues and options for, how people can communicate or spend their time or, just pick a category,
Yes.
And, I imagine at that point when like whatever your peers are doing, becomes sort of what you do. Mm-hmm. And that's where you can start to see where some of these generational branches, like this generation prefers that. Why? Because their peers are into this. And it's almost like a good virus or something like that.
And they talk about
Yes. And so, I imagine there's some of that going on.
Oh, definitely. And I, as you were talking, you got me thinking a little bit about, as larger things roll out the technology piece, we all adapt no matter what generation we're in and adapt in different ways. And individuals who, let's just get back into like the cell phones and so forth. I can think of a handful of baby boomers that they're almost worse than my daughter, I would say. And my daughter's actually not on her phone that often at all, but
they just don't want to miss out.
Playing around or
people will say, they'll blame that young generation, but it's like, now that we've all adapted and you've been using it for years and now you're comfortable with it, they're abusing it just as much. But on the flip side, I was with a group yesterday. And the audience was younger. I want to say the majority of the audience was younger. It was kind of more of an entry-ish level career place, right, for the people in that room. And they were talking about leading other individuals or managing other people, and they could be of all ages. And one of the things they were frustrated was that pushback they'd get sometimes from an older generation for having to use technology. And I was like, well, why do you think they're pushing back? And they'd have different things they throw out. But at the end of the day, it's fear. They did not embrace the computer and they, navigating around it is scary for them. And unfortunately, when we first learn how to do something, and it's fortunate or fortunately, we forget how everyone does. We forget how painful it was, how much of an uncomfortable it is, right? That uncomfortableness, learning how to navigate, right? It's kind of like if you completely change up a CRM or whatever, and you go to a new one, and now how you used to get your stuff is totally different. And everyone's frustrated.
Do I want to use a website? Do I want a personal, call it assistant, helping me through the whole thing? And they're on, I can see them through Teams, and I can see their face, and I can get to know them personally. Or I don't really care to see your face. I don't really want to talk to you. I just want to use the app because it's more efficient for me. So it's really giving people the options and not assuming, to your point, that the Gen Z wants the app and the boomer wants the personalized, help. So then that way they can choose what they want and how they want to interact with you, and you're not making assumptions. It's really then it comes down to, okay, are we covering our bases with all of the options that we have? Right. And then you can ask the person, what's your preference? Mm-hmm. How do you prefer to communicate with us?
Yes.
And then you meet them where they're at, and that's how you communicate with them.
Yes. And we all want choices. I don't care if you're 2 years old or 80 years old.
Yeah.
No one likes to be told, I have to do this.
Yeah.
We're going to put you in this box. This is our process. So you got to follow our process. No one likes that. Yeah. And so having those options it keeps people from moving to threat. It keeps them more in that they feel safe. And kind of expanding to life stages. I think of when you're managing people, whether it's you're managing, you're helping your clients or you're helping your employees, whichever that is, everyone's needs are different. And life stages, I'm thinking of life stages as a way of, I'm just right out of college. I'm single maybe, and people's life stages will evolve as if, we choose to have a family, whatever the dynamics look like of that family. Then the needs of having a family is going to impact people's needs at work versus I'm by myself, I'm single. Versus the different ages that my family is, and then now my family, we both have where our children don't necessarily live with us. So now that's a different needs and preferences too. It's a different freedom, right? And
which is fantastic.
Yes. Yes. But
you can't just say that boomers are more likely to relocate and millennials are too, but it's not this Gen X, and there's just something about Gen X, they don't want to relocate. It's like, what about their kids? Or it's like that plays into it.
It plays into it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, my kids both live in Lincoln, and so we're actually in the process of moving closer to them. Like, we live in Iowa and we live out in the country, but we're moving closer so we don't have to be so far away from them, but not in their backyard because they don't want that either. Right? But thinking about that, if I was ever asked to move and relocate for my job, I don't know that I would want to, because I wouldn't want to be that far away from my kids, and potentially grandkids someday. However, not everybody our age would have that thought. They might be like, well, it's a better opportunity, and I'm going to move across the country and I can FaceTime them, or, there's a flight and I'll see them a couple times a year. Well, yeah, that's not enough for me.
Yeah. I feel like everyone's trying to look for a lens that will help them understand people in large part.
Yeah, but people are messy and complicated. And
so really what we're talking about is finding a better lens, and that's where you have things like the DISC profile, where it's like, it's really turning the attention back to the individual, and helping you ask very, specific questions that help you sort of discern who you're talking with, what their preferences are, what their style is, and we would agree that that's probably a better lens,
Yeah, definitely.
even if the memes are funny.
Yes, they are definitely funny. Yes, they're definitely funny. So I think there's a lot we can laugh at and joke around about, but it's important that we pull back and, the human part of the business is sometimes the most complicated, no matter what business you're in. And we work with a variety of different types of organizations. It doesn't matter if you're manufacturing, your software, your, relocation, whatever it is, right? Because what we're focusing on is helping your people gauge and really learn more about themselves and learn more about others, so they create an environment that people want to hang out. and be successful in. And but that's focusing on each person's, looking at them as an individual, not trying to stereotype, not trying to put them in a box, reduce our assumptions, ask more questions, be curious, and picking, doing some things that cause us to have to pause a little bit and have more conversations to find out what's important to them.
Yeah. Which kind of, again, goes to show that there is going to be more of a more diversity in what each generation is going to express.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Which is great. I mean, I joke with our clients, and I'm like, if we were all the same, that we would not be innovative. It'd be boring. And I mean, I like change, so
I'm used to it. I mean, and when you're inundated with change at all times, you get used to it.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
But there's value in the different lenses that all generations, all ages, all people, I think, bring to the workforce. And it's, how do we get better at recognizing the value that individual brings and appreciating it? And that can even lean into our communication style. I mean, there's like a lot of areas that you could look in that, but really valuing that individual and those differences. So differences doesn't have to be a bad thing. Differences, when we have differing opinions, that is how we can expand our ideas and our thoughts and come up with other things that we would not have thought of because of the different perspectives. Yeah. It's really leans into people becoming more comfortable with having, I refer to it as a more of a productive conversation. We may disagree, but if we're listening with that open mind and really curious of like, why do you believe what you believe? And trying to understand that a little better. And then how does that influence my belief? It influences then how we think. And it influences ideas that might populate, especially when you get into businesses. And we're looking at, I mean, I don't know one organization that doesn't want to stay ahead of the competition, that doesn't want to be innovative and be leading in their industry and so forth. Organizations strive for that. But if we're all the same and we don't think differently, and we don't disagree on things, it's going to be harder for us to come up with new ideas.
What would you say to like an organization that recognizes that they sort of have a lack of diversity of ideas that are floating around their company, right? If they're not going to use the generational lens to help guide them towards a more diverse set of ideas, what other lens are they going to use then at that point?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, my first question would be, they probably have differing perspectives in that organization.
Or some being suppressed or what?
Yes.
Yeah.
But do people not feel safe, right? Do they fear speaking up or disagree, what may feel like disagreeing with someone of greater authority or of a different title, and because maybe they've seen that happen before and that person's no longer there. What was the impact of this disagreement and so forth? Because most likely they probably have it. It's just the safety's not there, that healthy culture where people don't feel like they can say, hey, I see it differently, or, I hadn't thought about that way. I was kind of thinking we do this, and let's talk about that. And then open up that dialogue where it's not, my brain doesn't go to threat because I feel like you disagree with me and I'm wrong and you're right. It's more of a open dialogue. But it's that's the first place I would be looking at is, what does it feel like there, right?
Look inside the house.
Yes.
Yeah, look inside the house. It's also, too, though, I feel like it does sort of reorient the conversation where it needs to be, though, because, if you're saying like, we can't just go after somebody older and expect that the experience is going to be there. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Because there are some, high level positions. Maybe you're trying to get an executive in there that knows their stuff. You can't just say like, well, just go find somebody. First of all, it's ageism, but like, but you know that people implicitly think that all the time, though. Yeah. Versus like let's look at these candidates and just look at the experience itself and see what does that say about the candidate.
Yes.
Well, go ahead. I was going to say that, there's sexism as well. It could be, we think that this male with all of this experience would be a better leader than a female with all of this experience. So there could be that lens as well. How do you start to filter through, say it's the resumes, right? Do you take the names off of them? and you just look at the experience before you start, as you're kind of choosing and starting to filter out the ones that you want to talk to. Are you using
a lot of it's unconscious?
A lot of it's unconscious. Are you leveraging tools like AI to do that for you, to try to take out? Hopefully it hasn't been programmed to lean in that direction.
Yeah, because it can.
It could be. But, are you using AI in a way that is helping you to maybe take that lens out of the picture and say, okay, this is the type of candidate we're looking for. And then you put the resumes in, and it helps you to kind of filter out the ones you're looking for, right? Or the filter out to look at.
Yes.
But it doesn't know. Maybe it doesn't have a name. It takes the name off of it. It takes any kind of identifying information that could potentially tell it age or sex. So it would take off, or demographics. So it would take off, yeah, I went to college, but I'm not going to tell you the dates that I started
or even
and graduated.
Where, because we all have biases, right? And
well, the people in the Midwest are the best. But just
especially so because it rhymes.
Yeah, it does. Yes. Yeah. So there's different ways that you can look for experience, but not necessarily focus on age, focus on sex of the person.
And I think, again, because we're worried for assumptions, we make assumptions that anyone can write or have AI write an amazing resume that looks like you are completely, like you're overqualified. So then that gets into how good are we interviewing and really uncovering what's there, but getting better at first, removing the biases that could potentially prevent us from finding that fit. Because a person to have knowledge and experiences doesn't mean they have to be 50, 60. They could be 35. They could be 30. I mean, everyone has just unique experiences and different and unique knowledge that who's to say they can't be successful? If we're pointing at age, it's, I think, like throwing darts within organizations. I think first, if we don't feel, it doesn't feel like we're innovative. It doesn't feel like, if it doesn't feel like bubbles, ideas are bubbling up from the bottom. And that is actually something to consider as well, is how good of a job are we at going really to the front line and seeking feedback from the people doing the work on what's working, what's not working, what ideas do you have on improvement, because they are the people that really are experiencing it and they have great ideas. And oftentimes we feel, because I'm at a higher level, I have all this experience and all these years, I know. And we're removed. We don't know. And we were talking about like Simon Sinek, right? He, some interview he was on, he was like, when is the last time, and he had a title that he threw out there, you were actually taking clients out? It's like, you don't.
The last time you talked to a client.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't.
Yes. But let's talk to the people who talk to the people. Let's talk to the people who are doing the work, because that truly is in getting more in tune to where do we have problems? Where do we have the gaps? Where do we have the friction points, whether it's internal or external? And let's get ideas on how to improve it through the seeking that feedback closer to that front line and bringing it up to the people making the decisions. Sometimes organizations, I think, really struggle with that.
Here's what I did. Okay. I took a conglomerate of all the books that people have written on the topic, at least the most popular ones. Mm-hmm. And I asked AI to give me a one-page or a one-line sort of summary of the book. And so I'm going to read that to you. Okay. You tell me what your thoughts are on it. Okay. So this is sort of the one-page summary for Sticking Points by Hayden Shaw. And it goes, you don't fix generational conflict by avoiding it. You fix it by making it useful.
100%. That's productive conflict that we were talking about earlier. It's if we avoid it, it's not going to go away. And if anything, we're naturally wired to have an in-group and out-group. And within that, we also are naturally wired to get people to navigate into our groups. So if we're not addressing these differences or the conflict, you're creating divides. You're creating, people are going to have their little group and they're going to have their little group. And as you bring on new employees, they're going to get sucked into, whichever group they relate with the most. And we're going to create 100% an us versus them. At least that's my initial response.
I would say,
what's your thoughts?
I'm thinking more like diversity of ideas.
Okay.
So more of a, are you kind of, you're not ignoring the generational differences, you're leveraging them to
Yes.
gather diversity of ideas. So maybe I have a group of people and they represent all of the generations. And I'm talking to them about something that we're struggling with. Maybe it is we're trying to figure out what kinds of relocation packages that, we want to put together that would entice somebody to move. What would cause you to move and what would cause you to move and what would you be interested in? Almost using them as...
See if you can find a pattern, or yeah.
Yeah, or is it all over the board? And back to, we just need to give people options. We don't want to say we're only going to offer you this package because you look like you're about ready to retire.
But in which case you still learn something, even if it is all over the map, because you learned.
Yes. Your diversity of ideas.
Yes.
I got another summary here. Okay. So this is from Gintelligence by Megan Gerhardt. And this one says, age diversity becomes a strength only when leaders stop managing around it and start leading through it.
So I am hearing the leading through it as that it's setting the expectations of, role modeling, how we embrace and include all the different generations and their ideas, kind of going back to a little bit what you just said, making sure that we don't get set in our way of, I'm only going to ask for feedback certain people that happen to be certain ages unconsciously, don't realize it, right? Because we might relate a little more with them in the moment or feel like we do. That I'm going to be role modeling and having conversations with all ages, all different groups of people across the organization. And we're going to be all moving forward, including, so you're creating more of an inclusive environment, because when you're working with other individuals, they feel included, they feel important if you're asking them questions. And where we're going to be more inclusive versus leaving behind.
Mm-hmm. And this is a quote from that same book. It says, assumptions are shortcuts that often take us in the wrong direction.
100%.
So
True.
Yes.
It's the easy button which our brain likes because it doesn't take assumptions. It doesn't take energy. If I go in with an open mind and get curious and ask you a lot of open-ended questions, and now I'm having to think and process, and it takes energy, and then our brain wants to save that energy because I may need it later. Mm-hmm. So assumptions is one of the number one things we're required to do, and it's not fact-based.
Yep. I'm sensing a theme. Yeah. All right. So this one's from The Remix by Lindsay Pollack. It says, success today belongs to those who remix old rules with new realities.
It's interesting.
Do you want to hear a quote from her as well?
Right.
All right. So it says, what one generation sees as lazy, another sees as efficient.
Yeah, I liked that.
Yes.
Well, specifically, there are several different ways to do something, right? So if I, as a Gen Z person, notice a shortcut to getting something done, but the outcome is the same.
Yep. That'd be the old rule, like the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
But the remix would be noticing a different way to get it done, more efficient,
noticing
maybe.
a more efficient way. It only takes me 5 minutes, not 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be viewed as lazy by the person who's always just done it 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But they've not leveraged critical thinking to think, maybe there's an easier way for me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So it is definitely not laziness. I think it's creativity. Yes.
Man. All right. So, this is an interesting quote. Okay. It says, learning is about the brain, not your birth year.
Yeah. I mean, anybody.
You're like,
learn it at any rate.
duh.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I have anything.
What I was thinking is every so often I'll bump into an individual and they'll joke with me, but they're joking and they're probably serious a little bit. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And it's like, well, I can't teach anyone new tricks. You can choose if you want to change your habit and do something differently, which is going to take effort and energy. But I can't make, and this isn't, I can't make anyone do anything, but you can choose to, and I don't care how old you are or what the age is. I mean, I've got, my parents are not at all into technology. My husband's parents are, his mom has one, and she wasn't even in the workforce. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she's 80. something, low 80s. And she is all over technology. I mean, all over social media, all over, and she chose to learn different things, get uncomfortable and learn different things. And that was her choice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to the individual. They choose to.
Yeah.
And if they're comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yes.
So, if I've been at an organization where there's just constant change, and so I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, even as I age and I retire and I move out of that, my mind is still probably going to be seeking something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to probably be more likely to seek out maybe different technology or seek out a different way of doing things or just be willing to try something new versus maybe someone who has done something the same way their whole life. And they're very comfortable. They have maybe never left the area that they live in, right? I mean, there's people that they don't leave the areas that they're from. They don't relocate.
Oh, okay. No. So you guys made me think of something because, before we started the conversation, before we even decided we were going to do this podcast together, I probably was on the side that put a lot more stock in generational differences than not,
Mm-hmm.
But, one of the people that really kind of broke the mold for me was Dar Andrews, our CIO, right? Now, I don't know what exact generation he is, but, he's probably an older Gen X, but, he comes in and I'm like, man, I love sitting down with this guy and just hearing about all the technology. Like he's got so many plans for us. And I'm like, this is going to be sweet, But again, like if I was thinking that, washed up, obviously, like this is, like then I wouldn't have been open to hearing all those ideas and seeing that, okay, maybe this generational divide isn't all that I thought it was,
Yeah, absolutely. It's just more about motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Am I internally or intrinsically motivated and energized by my subject at hand, right? Or my career of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm really jazzed about something, I'm super energized about it. I'm going to continue to learn. I'm going to be that lifelong learner. And I'm going to continue to learn more and more about it and continue to adapt and adopt new technologies just the way it seems like he's doing.
Yeah.
Because there's energy for it.
I want to thank you guys for coming on. It was a pleasure seeing you guys. And you guys are also going to be at GPA for us.
Yes, I will be there. Yes.
Yep.
I'm excited.
Excited for that too. And is there anything you want to share with our audience? Maybe where they can find you guys have a great podcast. You have awesome material on your blog. So right now is where you pitch that.
Well, we have our podcast. We release them twice a month, out every other week, really. And that's on Leadership Hustle. It's really just intertwined human behavior. It applies to a lot of people at all levels in the organization because it's about looking, really at the end of the day, it's about looking inward and how are we showing up every day and little, very, very focused areas of where they can grow.
Thanks. Well, again, thank you. And I hope you guys all enjoyed that. That was certainly a fascinating discussion for me. And that concludes another episode of Relocation Leader. We will see you back in 2 weeks.
This has been Relocation Leader, the podcast where we help advanced professionals in the world of global mobility. Listen back here every 2 weeks for a new episode on NEIReload.com or on your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next time.